At Verizon, anyone can trade in their old phone for a new one on us with Unlimited Ultimate, which means everyone in your family could get a new phone and stay on your family plan, keeping you close.
Hey, Mom, you seen my toothbrush?
Yeah, I'm almost done with it.
Oh, maybe too close. Trade in and additional terms apply. See Verizon.com for details.
Life's journeys take unexpected turns, and sometimes those turns lead to the uncharted territory of end-of-life care. It's a path filled with emotion, love, sadness, and often a sense of the unknown. Today, we're joined by Chaplain John, a hospice chaplain who provides spiritual and emotional support to those facing life's final chapter. Join us as we dive in to the heart of this sensitive topic, offering guidance, compassion, and advice for caregivers navigating this profound experience. Welcome to Fading Memories, a podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. Are you looking for ways to improve your sleep this new year? Well, you know how important sleep is to brain health, so let me introduce you to Cozy Earth Bamboo Sheets. I got a set for my birthday back in November, and let me tell you, I sleep cooler and better than I have in a long time. These sheets are super luxurious, just what I need after a busy day of doing all I can to support family caregivers. And guess what? You can give yourself or someone you love a gift of amazing sleep right now. Cozy Earth sheets are the perfect way to turn your bedroom into a sanctuary. You'll feel like you're sleeping on a cloud. Visit CozyEarth.com and use my exclusive 40% off code MEMORIES for a heck of a deal. Oh, and if you get a post-purchase survey, say that you heard about Cozy Earth from Fading Memories. I'd appreciate it. A better year starts with better sleep, so wrap yourself in Cozy Earth. If you like our show, be sure to follow it so you don't miss any new episodes, and please share it with a friend. That is the fastest way you can help an independent podcast like mine grow. Welcome back, Fading Memories listeners. You know I always appreciate the time that you take to listen to me and my guests. This week we are talking about Caregiver Conversations, Planning for the Unknown with Chaplain John Wenderlein. I think I still got that correct. And we're going to kind of talk about planning for the end and how to make end of life a little bit easier to navigate. So thanks for joining me, John.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. We had a long conversation here a month or two ago. I can't remember when, and life got busy, and I'm just glad we're finally able to get together.
Me too. It's like it always works out. And if it doesn't, it wasn't meant to be. I've learned that over the last almost 8 years. I can't believe I've been podcasting that long.
Absolutely.
Whew. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Oh.
So why don't you tell the listeners about yourself, and then we'll go into our conversation.
Sure. I live in sunny Florida, which, has just gone through a hurricane. I'm a hospice chaplain by occupation, still work at it. I've written a couple books on that subject. I look forward to having the opportunity just to maybe dispel some rumors, some myths, some misunderstandings about this thing called end of life. I think, I know that for sure, that everybody has a story. Everybody has a life story. Everybody has an end of life story. And I'm just blessed to be able to come in on what I call their last season of life. We would call that in the Christian world, and just, be a part of it. So that's what I do, and I enjoy every moment of it.
Well, that's good, because we need people like you. So before we hit record on everything, we were talking about families whose loved ones are on hospice, yet somehow they're still in denial that the end is coming, which we should remember every day when we get up and we open our eyes and take that first breath in the morning that, hey, we got another day, because no other days are guaranteed. I have, let's see, this is coming out after my birthday. So I recently had a birthday per the per the recording, or per the publication of this recording. And you never know. I plan on living to be 103 like my paternal grandmother, but neither of my parents made it to 78. So there's a pretty big window that I may or may not land in. So, how do we maintain our love and hope and all of the good care that we're giving our loved ones and not somehow slip into that realm of denial? Like, I've seen so many caregivers that just, the doctor tells them, oh, your loved one's got, 3 or 4 months, they're on hospice. Everybody's telling them the same thing, and yet all of them are wrong.
Absolutely. Well, because of the internet, everybody's become a doctor. Everybody goes, that joke years ago I remember on a advertisement on TV, where the girl, after someone asked her, how'd you meet him? And he said, he's a model. I met him on the internet, and he's a really not the best looking guy, but the idea was that you really shouldn't believe most of the things you read. And you're right. People, I months ago I told the group I meet with once a week of doctors and nurses and social workers. I said, I am so blessed to be working with optimists. There's no pessimist. There's no pessimist in the room. An optimist is someone who sees hope and promise in something to come, something that was, or something that is. A pessimist, well, we know what those people are. Those people are just, woe is me, the sky is falling, the old Chicken Little story, and I think it's the unknown. The joke for me has always been, if I knew the day and the moment that the Lord was going to come get me, I wouldn't be there. I'd be on vacation. So, what's the most amazing thing about this whole subject of caregiving is that with every person I meet, without exception, over the years I've been doing this, nobody deals with end of life the same way, in the same mannerism, in the same processes. Some will be devastated. Some will not shed a tear, and they'll feel guilty because they didn't shed a tear, but they have started to say goodbye months, years earlier, depending on how long your sickness is. And I know you said your mother was sick for a while, but it wasn't a long-term thing, which was a blessing. So, it's just different. I wish I had the answer for all that.
Mom had Alzheimer's for at least 20 years. And there was definitely a decline that it's easier to see in hindsight. I mean, I could see it, but because she was 77, I kind of assumed, and she had just turned 77 in January. She passed away March 31st, so it wasn't even 3 months. I kind of assumed she had 2 or 3 more years, and my husband wasn't convinced that she did because he didn't see her very often.
Right.
And I don't know, had she not fallen and broken her leg, how much longer she would have lived. I do think it would have definitely been longer than 3 months.
Well, you find that that's the biggest enemy of senior citizens is fall.
Yep.
Fall is to break a leg. I months and years ago often would say, I wish they would make a bubble wrap suit that you could put on your elder. Now, I had a nurse tell me, she said, what about those little carts that you put your baby in that they just can't fall left or right?
Oh, yeah.
So the point is that whenever someone like your mama falls, there's a major decline. It's just, and they break something. It's just a horrible process, and it's just par for the course. But often we think we have more time than we really have. So I tell people the time is now, the time is present. I tell my caregivers, when faced with the idea that the parent or the loved one is now asleep and not waking much, I tell them still have conversation with them. They can still hear, talk about vacations, talk about loves, talk about just anything, because that really will bring them some peace. Because our are passing away as a process, and it's
Mhm.
different for everybody. It's different for everybody. It just is.
Yeah, there's a caregiver I follow on in Instagram. Her mom is mostly nonverbal, very end of stage Alzheimer's, very end stage Alzheimer's, but occasionally responds in a correct manner, for lack of better term. Logical manner might be better, and eats now all the food is very it's cooked very soft, so think
Yeah.
like mashed potato kind of consistency. Eats like no tomorrow. Like that woman don't miss a meal or a snack or a hydrating drink, which is all important. I don't think she'd still be here if her daughter wasn't doing all the things that she's doing. So, it's a good thing. But my mom, I this people might think this is weird because my mom died during COVID, not just because COVID. I did not suspect that they would say she died from COVID or some other baloney on her
Sure.
death certificate, but I wanted to make sure that her death certificate was an accurate historical document. So I wanted it to say that she died from Alzheimer's because that's what she died from. And I had to look up the two medical terms, but she died. The death certificate essentially says she died from lacking of eating and drinking due to advanced Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Okay, proper
Very.
document, all is good. But I think this one woman, I think she's going to have a last meal and then decide, you know what, that was tasty, that was good, boink, and she's going to be gone.
You don't know. It could happen that way. I've had them. Quick story. I had a gentleman who they had told me he was near passing. Now the nurses will give you a percentage of life. They're at 20% or 30%. When they're at 20 or even 10%, man, it can happen any time. And so I went by to visit him. I had been visiting him in the past, ex-Marine, able to have conversation when I first met him. He slowly progressed to where he wouldn't have conversation. He had Alzheimer's, and then they said he was going to pass. So I went by. I held his hand while he was unconscious and said, it's time to say goodbye. It's time to, to pray. And I happened to be in the same nursing home the next day to see another patient, and there he was at the dinner table or the lunch table eating. And I called him by name. I said, "What are you doing?" He says, and he looked at me and he spoke. And he had a vivid moment. He said, "Chaplain, I'm eating. I'm hungry." The next morning, he passed away.
That's wild.
So you never, now, some doctors will tell you that your loved ones will have that burst of energy, that last little hurrah before the body just says enough. So I don't know. Caregiving is something that I think if I could write an accurate book on, I would be well loved. The only thing I know is there's so many factors that play into caregiving, and the basic factor is that everybody grieves differently and different processes. You can tell people there's 5 steps or 6 steps or whatever, however many we determine we ought to make up. But your mother had Alzheimer's for 20 years, so you actually, once she was diagnosed, started to go through this process of saying goodbye. And as she progressed, you progressed. Now, some people don't have 20 years. Some people only have days, weeks, months. So they have to go through it differently. The only common thread I find with caregivers that take an active role in the care of their family members is that the guilt they feel, the unsubstantiated, unrealistic guilt. And I think we talked earlier, and I call them the woulda, coulda, shouldas in our lives. They felt like they could have done a better job. Maybe they could have found a way to feed them. But when the body says they're not hungry no more, they're just not hungry. My father passed away, and I remember that conversation with my mother when she was upset because Dad wouldn't eat. And I said, "Well, Mama, did Daddy say he was hungry?" She said, "Well, no, but he's always hungry. My dad was always a big man, but he wasn't at the end of his life. He was not even half his weight. He was a lot more than half gone." So I walked in the room. I said, "Dad, are you hungry?" He says, "Son, I'm not hungry, but I can't convince your mama." I said, "Mom, if Dad's hungry, he'll let you know." Dad never ate another bit of food from that moment on, and he passed away a few days later. But the point is that in some of that, we just give up. We lose that desire to sustain nourishment, whether it be the mental disabilities of our brain, or whether it be just our body shutting down, because there's a point that our body just can't process food. So the worst thing you can do is put water in them, or food in them, as you probably know. But you know, I don't know. Caregiving is one of those things that when I meet a new family, and I shake the hand of a daughter or a son, or whoever it happens to be, I always say, "God bless you. You have Your mother or your father has decided to let you take on such a awesome responsibility that when you're all done, you're never going to be happy. It's going to take years. It's going to take years for you to come to terms." And they did it. They did it because they loved you. They did it because they knew that you would take care of them as best you could. So, and then I just go through the journey with them. I have multiple patients, 70, 80, 90 patients that I visit. And it's just a process. And I wouldn't imagine doing anything else. I wouldn't imagine.
So we touched a little bit on, I've had hospice people explain, your body goes through labor to be born and it also labors to pass. And I have experienced with family members and other caregivers just the almost freak out over the lack of eating. Do doctors and nurses not let them know that that's normal?
Our nurses should be given sainthood, because they are between the doctor and the patient, or the caregivers and the patient, and they are the mouthpiece to all the medical things that are going on, as you know, because you experienced some of that. And I can give you just horrid stories of family members who choose to do the wrong thing. They call it, the one thing, they'll use the word or the term aspirate. They will aspirate. Now, aspiration sounds really, I don't know, sounds okay until you realize, because you've given your loved one too much water or too much fluid, you've drowned them. They've choked to death. Aspiration is more common than we think, especially when the caregivers are involved. They're trying to do the right thing. They're trying to shove that last little bit of something in them, so they will live another day. Because I do, when I first meet patients, ask them, when I see a plate on their tray, I'll say, "Are you eating?" And they'll say, "Oh, chaplain, I'm not really hungry." Or I say, "Well, listen, I'm going to tell you, like I tell everybody, you have to eat. If you want to stay around a while, and I want you to stay around for years, you're going to have to eat." I said, because I'm selfish and I want to have conversation with you. And I tell them that all the time, because I want to hear their lives. I want to hear their stories. I want to hear their desires, what their life is like. It's for me, I don't know. I enjoy what I do just as much as most. Sometimes I tell people that when they hire a new person who works in our industry and works with a company I work for, they'll have them ride with me. And the first thing I jokingly tell them, I said, "Okay, now when you go back, you tell whoever's in charge how hard I've worked, how diligent I am, and how just I struggle every moment," which is, of course, what I show them all day long, is how much joy I have in what I do. So I don't know. I think again, caregiving is a struggle, and we try our best in this industry to get those first impressions of the family dynamics. The patient, the child, the children, and then try to take all that into account. Luckily enough, as you faced, that we have just but one power of attorney, one person who makes those medical decisions for the patient who might not be able to. So blessedly enough, we don't deal with others too much, because they always have an opinion. God bless the internet, but everybody has an opinion now. If not, the internet will give it to you. So I don't know. It's a wonderful thing.
How do we get family members to understand that not eating and drinking is not starving them or dehydrating them? Because my maternal grandfather died, unfortunately, from bone cancer. And this was 99. And I'm assuming things are different now. I'm pretty sure I know that they're different now. He was on a feeding tube while on hospice. and my aunt. So he was getting a very small amount of nourishment. And my poor aunt, the youngest of the 4 children, just could not wrap her head around that was enough. And she would give him more than he needed, and it caused all kinds of problems on the back end.
Yes.
I think people could figure that one out. And because he was so fragile, my uncle, the youngest, my mom was the oldest, so there was 2 boys in the middle. The youngest son just gave him just a light hug and cracked bones, because that's what happens when you have bone cancer. So it's not like you could take him in the shower and easily clean him up from my aunt's well-intentioned feeding of him. And so that was 99. We're talking, this is October of 2024. So that 25 years later, there are still people I encounter that just cannot wrap their head around that. And I'm really grateful for the hospice nurses that share a lot on social media. They've got really big followings. There's a couple that I'm aware of. I've learned a lot more, like the rally you were talking about, the guy who the next day was having lunch. I understand from these social media gals that happens in about 1/3 of cases. That's got to be really hard for families, because you think, oh my gosh, he's better. And then he's gone. Yeah.
Well,
I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that, because I think that would have been mentally hard. Yeah. Not that I don't think I would have thought my mom was better, because she'd been sick with Alzheimer's for so long, and you obviously don't get healed from bone cancer. That's my grandfather. I don't know how I would have felt like with my dad.
Well, you are blessed in the fact that you're in or of this industry. You have an understanding. You deal with professionals all day long, and you listen and you pay attention. But the most important thing is you're able to, I tell people what I don't know, I don't pretend to know. So when I want to know something about something that's more specific, I go to a professional. Now, it doesn't mean I don't get a second opinion, but when a doctor tells you or a nurse tells you, you will kill your loved one if you continue to do this. Now, they do it in a more specific, nicer way. And you continue to do it. Well, shame on you. That's all I can say. Because
I wonder if the term, you said they say it in a nicer way. Maybe that's the problem, because I'm thinking of a gal that was in, so I facilitate a support group now, but prior to that, I was a support group participant. And during the pandemic, I stayed in the support group for quite a while after my mom passed, just because it was kind of a habit.
Sure.
And I was used to seeing all these people in person. Another member's loved one passed, and it started with the doctor saying, this person's got, 3 or 4 months to live. I think he lived a little longer, but she was furious, the doctor, absolutely furious. And at the end, the hospice company could do no right. Now, this was during the pandemic, so I don't know if some of her complaints were overblown or just, I know the hospice company we used for my dad, we kept playing phone tag. So I finally had to go with somebody that I actually got on the phone. It was the company that coordinated with the care home my mom was in. Simply because, and I, again, had no ill feelings. It was like, this is the like, we don't know what the heck's going on right now. So I can't expect these volunteers that are answering the phone to be better. It was frustrating because I wanted them, but sometimes you just have to move on. But yeah, this gal just, like, every step of the way, everybody was wrong. Everybody was terrible. And it was just, Lord, I think her grief process was worse because of all of the denial.
That's exactly
and
right.
I think, I don't know, mine was weird because my mom died right at the start of all of the lockdowns and everything. And I felt very blessed that I got to see her the couple days, day and a half before she passed away. We got to see her the day she died. So we didn't have any of, them whisking her away, and that was that. And nobody in my family got sick or lost jobs or anything. So it was like, I can't complain about anything. There's a lot worse going on right now. I have zero places to complain.
Right.
But I do think extended it because I don't know. There are times I wonder, like,
Oh,
we still in this grief process or not?
there is a grief process, but the trick is that everybody, it's out much like what your mother experienced. In your mother's sickness, and you know this to be true. There can be moments, it can last minutes, days, weeks, that your mother becomes violent. Then it goes away. Then it just subsides. The same way with people who are just not accepting of the fact. They just don't know how to let that person go. They don't know how to, and it could be in their personal, it could be in their way, in their personality. It could be that the way they are and the way they wanted to treat everybody that was wrong really is the way they treat everybody anyway. They're just those people. When we've met those people I like to keep as far away from as possible. But some of the problem with hospice, getting back to your question, is the nurses have to be professionally diplomatic. And sometimes those things don't run hand in hand. Like they can't look at a caregiver and be their mama.
Okay.
Can't be their mama. Can't say this is the way it is. They have to, what's the word? They have to take them by the hand and walk them through this process too. The problem is they may have 12 or 15 patients at a time that they're seeing once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week. And when a patient gets to that percentage of disability, like I said, 10% or 20%, they have to see them every day. We're required to see everybody every day, which is really not a requirement because I want to be there at the end. But you're going to get. It's funny how most nurses can look at the initial conversation they have with the caregivers and the family dynamics and the patient, and they'll run all that together in their minds, and they'll conclude either it's going to be an easier exit or a harder exit. I remember one time when I first got into this industry years ago, I wasn't always in this industry. I worked in another industry for a long time until the Lord blessed me with this. But I remember sitting in a meeting with all these professionals, and somebody brought up the fact that these things had happened. These things, the caregiver and the patient, who was not always there, had said these things had been done that were inappropriate. Now, I'm new to the industry. I'm kind of on the outside looking in, common sense looking in. And when they got all done with this, I raised my hand and I said, hey, everybody, listen, not a doctor, not a nurse. I'm just that guy. But how much credibility you give these patients when they're, not of sound mind? And they said, well, I said, no, I met that person that you're talking about. And if they told me it was raining outside, I would look outside to see that it probably wasn't raining. So nurses have to be careful. They're licensed.
Mm-hmm.
They can be brought up on charges, just like a doctor or just like a lawyer. Their license can be taken from them. They renew it every year, every 3 years, every 5, however that works per state. So, and they've worked hard to get that. And nursing degrees are not easy. And so a nurse is probably, I don't want to say they're the number one casualty of what I do for a living, but they're an important number because many, statistically speaking, a nurse will come out of a hospital setting where they might be ER nurses or something that's really just fast paced, save life. And then they say, I need a break. And they say, let's do hospice because they're convinced hospice is just slower paced. It's palliative care, not aggressive care. They're so wrong because what happens is they see another side of this caregivers where if you walk into a hospital and you're the caregiver, let's say, or you're the family member, you fall in line with what that hospital tells you. I mean, other than they won't, if they break the law, of course, but if they're giving you medical advice, you take it, or they don't accept anything less. And the hospice business is a little different. It's not because we have to have the business or we're afraid to lose the business, because there's plenty of business.
That's true.
It's because these nurses these CNA, these nurses, these social workers, and even men like myself or women like myself have such a care that the quality of life continue until their very last moment as long as possible, that they just, they just want to get along and get on. And sometimes caregivers make it very hard. So I think when we speak, I think denial is the number one issue um, with caregivers, and it shows its ugly head in different ways. I mean, we talked about them. One way is overfeeding them. Another way is denying them medications. Another issue in this industry is that I don't want mom to have morphine. I've had them say, I don't want mom or dad to have Oxycontin because I don't want them to become addicted. I mean, I've had people say just wacky jacky jobs stuff, I call it, just wacky stuff. And it's because they're letting the world lead them through this road because they have there's no manual. There's
No.
when we're in fourth grade, we learn math, we learn how to do arithmetic, or we know multiplication, division in fourth grade. But you have to have a book and somebody on a chalkboard to show you. Well, guess what? The end of life, as you know, with your mama, there's no book. Now there's been great books written, you know, on theses, on thoughts, on probabilities, but you know what? You can lay that book right beside while you're sitting there talking to a caregiver, and I guarantee you, they may fall within some of those parameters, but they won't fall into all of them. So you have to. It's a really, I don't know. It's a fine line our nurses walk. I have a lot of respect for our nurses. It's the most amazing thing about our nurses when it comes to caregivers. When you said someone called and said you might want to come by and see mom, or you might want to, they'll make that call. And I've had caregivers mad because when they came, the loved one didn't pass away. They had to leave. They had to leave and fly back to their homes many miles away. And I remember looking at them as diplomatically as I could. And I said, well, listen, I'm going to stay with your mama. And they've got a full-time caregiver that's coming from our company. When a person gets down to that percentage, they get round the clock care. We have somebody they do not pass away alone. They just do not. We do whatever it takes to make sure they have somebody. So I've seen the ugly side of all things, and I've had, several dozen maybe in the last 10 years or so, 8 years or so, who get angry because that nurse called me and we came all this way and we got to go back home. I've had them look at their watches and say, and I call it having a come to Jesus meeting with them. That's when I want to be very bold with them. And sometimes, I have to bite my tongue even in who I am. But yeah, that's the person that you went through your class with, your grieving class with, whatever it was. That's the ugly side of what really should be such a wonderful thing. Because with birth comes a wonderment of life.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of life should come the wonderment of an end life, a life well lived. I've never had a patient who's 95 years old or 90 years old say to me, Chaplain, this life has been so long. It's just so long. It's 95 years, it's forever. They've always said, what has happened to my life? 50 years has passed and I don't even know where it went. They just, as we reflect, well, look where we're at. We start to reflect. And I tell them, I said, that's just the way life is. The scripture says that it's like a morning mist on a lake. There one minute, gone the next. It's just one of those things and we are designed to breathe. We are designed to live. We are designed to draw that last breath. And we don't know that time, whether we're spiritual, we believe God has appointed a time, or we're not spiritual, we just think we run out of energy, however that works. I deal with all facets. I have a particular sway on it, of course I do. But I never impose that will on anybody. I don't proselytize. That's not my job. My job Sweet lady said one time to me, Chaplain, why do you keep asking me why if I'm not feeling good? Every time I'd visit my patients, first thing out of my mouth, how you feeling? Do you feel okay? Because if they didn't, I call that nurse and say, Kathy, Bill, Susan, do me a favor. As soon as you can you run by and see Miss Agnes or Miss Susan because she's sick? And they'll stop what they're doing, they'll organize, and they'll make that trip. Because if we don't do that, we're really not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Palliative care is to keep them at a place where they have the most or the least amount of pain. But I had her ask me one time, she says, why do you keep asking me that all the time? Why do you keep asking me? I said, and I paused and I paused. You got to remember, she was a woman who was raised in upstate New York. She was of a particular faith and a particular political spin. You could put all that together to kind of get a synopsis of who this woman was at 99 years old. And I said, it's because I love you too much. I don't want you in pain, and I'm going to miss you. So I want to go before you, because we had wonderful conversations about her marriage of 76 years, all these things. I wouldn't have changed that for the world. When she got sick and she was in the hospital and they knew that she'd never get out, her family, who was all over the world, her son, very successful in Europe, all flew in and they called me to her bedside, and they had never met me. And when I walked through the door, they said, oh, so you're the chaplain that Mom's been talking about. I went, ooh, okay. Is it good? Because her mama was her mama.
Feisty?
Yeah, and I loved it. I loved every bit of it. She was so fun. There's nothing she surprised me with. And in that, she had 6 children. And I knew 3 of them. The other 3 were in other parts of the country. The 3 of them were pretty close to where they could visit her. So I got to have conversation. But all 6 of those children between the ages of, let's say, 40 and 70, all were dealing with goodbye differently, all dealing differently as caregivers, all different. I can look at every one of them and I say, you're no longer in the grieving stage. You're in you're in that stage, or you're in the beginning stage. Every one of them, it was like a vision of what all the stages were. So when I saw these people, I said, you know what? That's why being a caregiver is so tough. The only thing I can say about caregiving is you are, and it's amazing that family members who are sick will choose the youngest of maybe 5, or the middle child of a family of 6, or they'll choose the oldest. There's no rhyme or reason. Whatever it is that's instilled in that person that they've chosen is the love and the companionship and the care that they need at that moment that they're getting ready to leave this world. And they entrust everything that they are within that person. So never a lot of rhyme or reason to that. But usually when I meet that person who's in charge of the care, like you were with your mama, I see in them what the patient sees in them, that care, that the concern. But I don't know. Caregiver's a tough thing. It's just a tough thing.
So one of the things we were talking about before, excuse me, we hit record, was you had a family whose loved one had passed, and you asked them which funeral home they needed to transport their loved one to, and they hadn't decided, which gives me a headache thinking about it. How do we encourage the caregivers that are listening that it is not a bad thing to plan ahead? Because we're all gonna go at some point. And as I was mentioning, and I'll retell this briefly, is I know a caregiver who's picked out the funeral home, the outfit, has started purging the loved one's belongings. And it would be very easy to look at that as callous and uncaring. And that is the exact 1000% opposite of this caregiver's journey, because their person would not be around had their care not been just top notch for nearly a decade. So how do we gently ease them into, like my dad pre-planned, so I didn't have to think about all that. The only, just for a little bit of humor, the hospice company that took care of my dad said they enjoyed my dark sense of humor. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But my dad My dad and I are very frugal people. I enjoy getting a good deal, makes my heart sing.
Right.
Um, there's certain things you got to spend good money on, but there's a lot of things you can get a good deal. That's
It's,
that's me. So my dad went down the list, picked the bottom option, which was cremation with a cardboard box. I didn't even know that was an option until
it
then.
is. It is.
It isn't when you're a bigger guy,
Yep.
because I was informed by the funeral home, which thankfully was owned by family friends, and it was run by somebody I kind of knew. We were in the same. We were Rotarians in different clubs, so I had a lot of trust in him. He had to call me and tell me that they couldn't use a cardboard box because my dad was too big. And I could have freaked out, or I mean, I kind of laughed because I was like, I really didn't think the cardboard box was a really good idea anyway. So that was my experience with my dad. I didn't have to, I didn't have to write his obituary. I didn't have to do any of it. He had pre-planned all that, and that's such a blessing. So my mom couldn't do that, obviously, because of her Alzheimer's.
Sure.
And she died during COVID, so everything was 1,000% different. But how do we help people understand that planning ahead is not giving up or callous or uncaring? Because I know personally how much it benefited me that I didn't have to make a lot of those decisions, other than
It's
texting the funeral home director to see if my dad's wedding ring was still on him.
There we go. Well, I have to say this, as a Christian as I am, um, this is not a subject that you would think only happens to those people who we like to call non-Christian. Christians go through this. If you have a pulse and you have a loved one who's dying, or you are getting older, everybody will face this. Like you said, we are all coming to the end, one way or the other. So, uh, the obvious, I always have to speak the obvious. The obvious is to pre-plan like your dad did. The obvious. Yeah, my wife and I have pre-planned. It took me a little while for her to get off that idea. She loves the Lord with all her heart, but it took her a little bit of time. I had to keep coaxing her. It took a lot of years, but we're done because I didn't want to leave her with my daughter. I think the most important thing is to remember you're doing this because you love the person you leave behind so much that you don't want to leave them with that burden. Like you had talked about the friend who had already started to get rid of memorabilia, get rid of things, you know. And then having said that, if you love that person so much that you want to take care of your affairs, you pre-plan. You get it done, you get it set aside, you let the person know you are gonna leave in charge, where that stuff's at, or give them a copy of it. But secondly, what you do is you listen to the nurse. When your mother came on service, she would have had a do not resuscitate,
Mm-hmm.
DNR, and we like to publicly place that somewhere in the house, usually on the refrigerator, because it never fails that when something happens to that patient, the fire department comes in, they don't know no different. They start pounding on the chest, they start CPR, they start the paddles on a person who's terminal, but they don't know. So I
Mm-hmm.
always make sure it's as public as you can get it, but get that DNR signed. It doesn't mean, now again, we have hospice patients that will not sign DNRs. We have loved ones, caregivers that will not sign, will not even mention. Sometimes we'll have loved ones who say, listen, you can go and visit my father, but you can't tell him you're with hospice. And I'll say, well, I won't lie to your father, but I won't bring it up unless he asks, because it's against the law. You can't do that. You have to be, if he's got a good sound mind. But that's secondly. Thirdly, again, listen to the nurse. If she tells you, and she's gonna say a couple things or gonna ask a couple questions that usually the person asks when you sign up for hospice. Do you have a funeral home? Do you have arrangements already made? And who's going to sign the DNR? Who's going to sign the DNR? But we will let people skate through that because we think that all takes time to figure out, except to the point where I have to tell you the story again about being on call. As a chaplain, I'm on call at night, as in rotation, called to a house that they're not my normal patient. I'll come into the house, two adult daughters. When I say adult, north of 50, and a father who's north of 80, and probably close to 90. And mama's passed while I was there. And I told them at 2 o'clock in the morning, well, when you were done with your mama, when you're done saying goodbye, let me know. I'll take on the responsibility of the nursing home. I mean, the funeral home. I'll do that for you. I don't want you to have to do that. And they paused, and their eyes got as big as quarters. And they said, Mama never chose one. And I said, your mother never chose one? And they said, no, we couldn't get her to do that. And, that was Mama's fault. So, if you can get some of that behind you, those things I just spoke about, caregiving can be a lot more beneficial because you have more time to love on, to spend with that person that's going to be leaving you. Because if not, you spend your time worrying about the funeral, you spend your time worrying, as if you don't have enough to worry about. Caregivers are these people who, if they live with and take care of their family members, this is a typical caregiver. They only sleep barely when the patient sleeps. They eat only when they have time to eat, and very rushedly because they want to feed, care for. They seldom take a lot of showers. They get time to brush their teeth maybe, but it is a 24-hour-a-day job. And what happens is the closer you are to that patient, the more you love that patient, the more intense this care can be, to the point where I've had senior ladies who felt they needed to take care of their husbands physically, and they were bigger men than them, have heart attacks.
Mm-hmm.
I had one that was pinned under her husband for 45 minutes till the neighbors came. He wasn't dead, but he had passed out and fell on her. So caregiving, there needs to be a lifetime award for caregiving. There just needs to be, because it is just one of those deals. But again, get all that taken care of like your daddy did. When they come on hospice, get the DNRs, get all those things settled, get it all settled. This way you can focus on what's most important, and that's sharing the end of life, loving your family member as much as you can. And then when they draw their last breath, then you worry about nothing more than a phone call, and it puts it in the processor. It's the wheels start to turn. But good luck getting that done.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you after my dad died on a Thursday night, like at 10 p.m. And basically my mom had a scheduled hair appointment the next morning. We had the caregiver, my sister, myself, and my mom. We ran around, did a whole bunch of stuff. I think that was sort of that post dying, I don't know what you might call it, but it's like you got to take care of things. So
Right.
After that, so that following weekend, I tell people a lot, I felt like I had 48 hours to grieve my dad, because then I had to deal with my mom.
Sure.
And one of the things that was really hard, my husband came into the bedroom and I'm literally standing in the closet staring at my clothes. And he's like, what's the matter? And I'm like, I don't know what to wear. I don't want to wear anything that's my favorite, because I don't want to remember my favorite outfit with, him dying. And I said, I just can't make the decisions.
That's right.
And he looked at me and he goes, are you ready for lunch? And I said, yes. And he said, what do you want to eat? And I said, I don't know. I just can't make decisions. And so if I had to take that weekend, or I don't even know if funeral homes are open on the weekend other than for services, and make all these decisions, Lord, that would have been hell.
It would have.
So
you responded to that situation in a normal way. You no longer wanted to make a decision. You had downloaded enough. You had made enough decisions. You just wanted it to pause, even though you knew I got to put something on. What am I going to wear? But that's exactly part of that getting over and getting on with life. Is you come to a point where you I had a sweet lady who took care of her mother, and I believe it like you told me about the lady that you believe extended that person's life for 10 years. Every time I visited this sweet lady, she looked like new money. She was cleaned up. Her daughter took care of her like, because there was great love. And
Mhm.
when her mother was sick, near death, they called me and said, Chaplain, can you swing by? I changed my route and went by to be there when she passed, by the way, only, only by the grace of God. And I remember she'd taken care of her mother for 5 years of her life. She was a CPR, a CPA, had took a leave of absence and took care of her mama. And she had four other brothers and sisters who didn't know how to deal with it. Imagine that. So we are hours into her mother passing, and as we're leaving her mother's room after they've come to get her mother, the funeral home, she looked at me, and then the first question out of her mouth was, "What am I going to do now?
Yep. I knew that question was coming. Now what?
What am I going to do now?" I said, "Sweet lady, first of all, let me tell you what you're going to do. What's going to happen? Once you wind down, now, she had a husband that loved her, like your husband loves you. He uh, he said, 'Honey, it's going to be okay.' I said, 'But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sleep for 2 days. Your body's just exhausted.' I said, and then several days, weeks later, I went by her house, and it wasn't a normal thing to do. I wasn't getting paid to do it, but I did it anyway because I answer to a higher power. I just do. So I knocked on her door, and greeted me with a big smile, and she said, 'Chaplain, how are you doing?' I said, 'I'm doing wonderful.' I said, 'Lady, I'm just checking on you. Did you get your sleep?' She said, 'I did. You were right.' She said, 'And guess what?' I said, 'I don't know. You tell me. We're going to go on a cruise.' My husband had bought a cruise, and the cruise was set up to where he'd already paid for it. And within a year's time, they would take it because he knew my mama wouldn't be around. So we're going on a cruise for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I said, get gone, enjoy yourself. So, I haven't talked to her since she came back from their 2 week vacation. But what I know is, as a caregiver, she showed me the more positive side, and you talked about the more negative side with this person that was in your group of what a caregiver can experience after someone dying. But it's because mama had it all figured out. Her mother had been a school teacher, and she had every line, every I dotted, everything done. She had already given away her jewelry. She had she downloaded to the nth degree, because her mother, when she could speak to me, says, "Chaplain, I love my daughter too much to leave her with things. The only thing I want to leave her with is memories." If you're a caregiver, if you can just work towards having nothing but memories to worry about, the moment your loved one passes, then you've done a good job. And they've done a good job. So, and I know it sounds good, but you know how that happens sometimes. Practice is not always the way it is. It tends to be.
No, but I think that's a great place to end so people can marinate on that thought.
Good.
Because I always tell people you cannot box up your life and put it on a shelf and wait for the caregiving journey to end. Because with me, it was 20 years. Like my mom started showing signs when I was in my early 30s, and she passed when I think it was 54. I'd have to do the math. Yeah, I'm not good at math. Just because you're caregiving doesn't mean you don't have your own dreams and desires. Yes, it's going to take longer. You're not going to have time to get that MBA or PhD or learn how to throw pottery or whatever it is that makes your heart pitter patter. But you want to be left with memories and not just a house full of junk and stuff and just decisions that your brain cannot make because you're grieving.
You want to uh, job number one is you want to come to the end of this loved one's life with nothing but love. Because love is a secret. It's a secret to all things. Real love, true love. And it's defined in caregiving. Love is a passion of caregivers, I'll tell you.
Well, I thank you for this really lovely conversation. Chaplain John's books will be linked in the show notes. I know he's working on the third one.
I am.
You'll let
I'll start
you'll
it.
let you'll let
Go
me
ahead.
know if it comes out before the end of 2024.
It won't, because
Okay.
my editor in chief, which is my wife, says I will start working on it the first. But it's going to be a book based on my COVID experiences. I was a hospice chaplain at a large hospital when COVID ran rampant. And of course, at the same time, I worked in the nursing care industry as a hospice chaplain. So you can imagine, I have
Yeah, you
lots
got
of,
some stories.
that's,
She's gonna have a lot of editing to do, I think.
well, she does that because you said you weren't good with math. I'm not real good with English.
And that's what makes the world go round.
Well, I want to thank you for letting me come on. I want to thank you for just having just a wonderful, easygoing conversation about life. Because I used to say 20 years from now, 40 years from now, things we do today may not matter. But I think what we do today, what you do today, I think it matters. If we can touch one person, if we can change one mind, one thought, one avenue of life about the way a person is a caregiver, then we've done our job. We've done it.
Absolutely. You tell I need glasses to see the screen. Like that button is really
I'm
tiny.
not wearing mine because I glare, but
Oh, well, see, I have these for looking at the computer and these for reading the to-do list. I'm not really sure why my eye doctor wasn't big on the progressives.
oh yeah,
I have really weird eyesight, so I have lazy eye, and my brain thinks I see double because technically I do. Um, and so it disregards the input from one eye at a time. So I don't have depth perception, and I only have peripheral vision on one side, and it's a mess. But it's been this way my entire life, so it's normal for me. It's just sometimes lighting birthday candles is a trick.
yeah. Listen, I do things with glasses now. My eyesight, I had cataracts removed, and they wanted me to spend another 4 or 5 thousand to get lenses put in, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. So I still wear glasses. It's mostly to read close-up things, but I thank you for the conversation. It's always fun for me to be able to download.
No, I agree. So this is supposed to come out on that looks like Christmas Eve. See, I need the other glasses for this. But you know what? I can wear them on top of each other.
There you go.
Yep,
That's okay.
Christmas Eve. Maybe I might have to rearrange that. I don't know. We'll see.
If you'll just send me a note saying it's coming out or something, that'd be wonderful. Listen,
I usually send an email the day it comes out. Last week it didn't come out for over 48 hours, so I still have to send her. There was something blocking the RSS feed. Every so often my website goes,
you had that problem when we talked the first time. It was taking longer for you to get stuff figured out.
yeah, I think what happens is because I went, so my web guy changed some stuff, and I went to a conference in New Jersey the last weekend of September. I came back, I loaded up I came back, the Tuesday episode came out, I think that was like October 1st. Everything was fine. Loaded up a whole bunch of stuff, show notes, just like put a lot of new stuff on the site on the back end, and then the next day it doesn't publish. And because I'd had the problem before, and my audio host was like, well, Apple says it could take up to 24 hours. I'm like, it hasn't taken more than an hour ever. So that makes no sense to me, but apparently I'm not going to get anywhere by making that argument. So I waited, and it wasn't till Wednesday they're in Ohio, so they're 3 hours ahead of me, like you are. So when I called them, they were at the end of their day. People were tied up. And then I called like right after 2 because I can't do math. And I thought it was like not 5 o'clock yet there, and it was. And so then I sent them an email, and they're like, if you clicked on the RSS link, it wouldn't go anywhere. So it was kind of like file not found. But then when the web guy goes like 36 hours later, he's like, I don't know what the problem is. Or maybe it was longer than that. I think it was more than 48 hours. He's like, he sends me a screenshot of, I don't know what that gobbledygook was. And I'm like, it still hasn't published. And then they were texting each other. And I'm like, wait, nope, that's a lie. It just literally just popped right in. And it said posted 2 days ago. But I'm like, trust me, it wasn't there 2 days ago. It's podcasting is weird because I have a website where everything goes. And like your episode will be there with the show notes and the links to your books and all the good stuff. And it'll be scheduled for midnight, 12:01 a.m., December 24th, 2024. And then the audio is hosted on another platform, and then they're connected through an app, and it's all very seamless. Works really well. It's easy until it doesn't work.
I am computer illiterate, not totally. I mean, I would have never got through a couple of my degrees without knowing how to use a computer, but still. Well, I'll look forward to it. I have a web page myself. I'll always put on there that you and I had a conversation. It was wonderful. I'll always just talk you up. And then when it comes out, I post it on my webpage, remembermejw.com. And it's just, it's wonderful to have conversation. Next year, I've got a couple opportunities to go speak at hospice conferences. Just tell stories. That's really what I want to do. I want to stand up and just tell stories. It'd be a great gig.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm working on.
Just stand up and tell stories. So
yeah, well, I want to use my stories and the stories of all the people I've talked to and talk to corporations and be like, hello, yep. You're losing money because of this elder care crisis. And there's some really simple ways you can fix that.
There's a and I can't remember her webpage, but she is somebody who had her mother in the same situation your mother was in, and she has a web page. I think she's out of Indiana. I'm trying to remember. She's up north, and I interviewed with her, and that's what she does. She has a website designed for a bunch of free links to social care related to Alzheimer's, those sort of things. And then I don't know what all she does, but she's been doing it for about 25 years. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, it's been about 6 months since we talked, but she's got a little different. It's a little different. I don't know. She seems a little more profitably driven. Not that you may not be profitably driven. You want to make a living. You got to make a living.
It's like I order groceries every Sunday night, and it just kills me that the milk, the eggs, the berries, it's like $70.
Oh, it's just crazy.
Well, part of it, I got to get my husband to stop eating so many damn eggs because I order 36 eggs. I don't eat that many eggs because he's killed me for eggs. I'll have a fried egg or an egg sandwich once a week or so.
A couple chickens and let them run your yard.
Yeah, well, we live in the Sierra foothills. The deer would take out the chickens or the golfers.
Yeah, either way. Yeah.
What else do we have? We got squirrels. We have, what we have that lives in our community is a bald eagle, a pair of bald eagles.
Yeah. I remember when we went on our cruise to Alaska, when we stopped at Juneau, if you've ever been to Alaska.
Not yet.
There were bald eagles on every light post. It was in a harbor where there was a lot of sailboats and boats. And there must have been, in this small harbor with these boats, there must have been 100 bald eagles. And I mean, mama ones, big, scary.
They're big.
Yeah, they're probably scary and big there at your place, but these things were monstrous for bald eagles. I mean, they had a wingspan of 7 or 8 feet probably. They were probably, when they were sitting on their haunches, they were probably 4 foot tall. They were this big around the neck. It was just unbelievable. I
think ours are average size. Sure. I think they were probably like 2.5 feet tall with like 6 feet wingspan. I mean, I don't know. I haven't gotten that up close and personal, but I don't think they're, everything's bigger in Alaska. I remember when my daughter was like in 5th grade, she had an atlas and they overlaid the outline of the state of Alaska over the contiguous 48 states, and Alaska took up like most of it. And I was like, dang, I knew Alaska was big, but I didn't know it was that big. I guess that's why Texas threw a hissy fit when Alaska came along.
Well, I
They
lived
were the
there.
biggest state until Alaska came along.
Yeah, they're a very large state. When you ever travel from one end to the other, it's pretty long. I lived there 10 years, so I know. But
How long does
well,
it take to get from like the east to the west and like the
8 hours,
widest part?
8 or 9 hours.
Okay.
It's 8 or 9 hours across. I can go from here to the middle of Texas, Austin, Texas, and it takes me every bit of 25 hours driving. But it takes to go through to cross Louisiana and then half of Texas. Texas is a good 14 hours, 15 hours. It takes you about 7 or 8 hours to get out of the state, and then the rest of the time you're either in Louisiana, short Mississippi, and then half of Texas, just half of Texas. So it's because that's where New Austin is, about the middle of the state. But
The reason I ask is because let's see, from the San Francisco Bay Area to like LA is about 6 hours. So
hours.
that puts it 8 from here
I used
ish.
to go
8,
from
9. Pardon me?
I used to go from Port Hueneme or Oxnard or Malibu to LA a lot. And we drove to Frisco once or twice. And then we'd go up to San Diego. I was in high school out there, so we traveled and wrestled and played football. But I also traveled independently a few times, but the scenery was much prettier.
I'm
California
just, I'm just,
coastline, beautiful.
I'm just trying to figure out how long it would take to get from the Oregon border to LA
Oh my
or
gosh.
Santa Cruz, not Santa Cruz, San Diego. That's probably 12 hours, I would think.
Yeah, Vegas
Yeah.
is not far.
No,
Not
I can
really
get to
far.
Reno in about an hour and a half
Yeah,
because like I said, I live about an hour and 20 minutes south of Lake Tahoe and about an hour north of Sacramento. I swear everything is like about an hour from me. Like we were with Kaiser until earlier this year, and everything is in Roseville, which is a big suburb of Sacramento. That's 45 minutes away. Davis is about 45 minutes away, but you travel past Roseville. I don't know how everything is like an hour away. It's so weird.
well,
So
I
I was
tell you,
just
you have a
I was
blessed
just curious the size because, California, we're the third largest state, most populous. So I
right.
was just kind of curious how we compared size, like traveling wise.
Well, it's I'm in Florida because my family's in Florida, and as long as they still live here, I will. So,
Most
oh,
of
no,
my family is still in the San Francisco Bay Area. My dad's side of the family, the middle brother passed away in February. His daughters live in Idaho. They're Mormon. They live in Idaho and Salt Lake City.
I tell you,
My aunt is going to likely move to Salt Lake City next year. Um, she's not moving to Idaho where the granddaughters are because it's too cold, which that kind of surprises me. I mean, I get the too cold because yuck. It's like the way it is today is about as cold as I like it. Any colder
right,
and I'm grumpy. So I can totally get why she doesn't want to do that, but her granddaughters are there.
right.
So,
We moved
and then
four
my
times
the only remaining uncle on my dad's side is also he's in Idaho and Palm Springs.
back and forth.
So, yeah, so I don't
Now,
know.
we moved 4 times in our lives to get closer to our grandkids. Every time my daughter and son-in-law would move, they didn't move far, but they moved. We would a year or two when they moved away, we realized they were a half hour, 45 minutes away. We'd say, my wife would say, "Can we move?" I said, "Okay." So now they're in their mid and late 20s. They don't have much to do with us. But when they were younger, we followed them everywhere because they're only little ones. So
That is true. I'm the oldest grandchild on both sides. My sister is number 2 on both sides. And then it's my cousins on my dad's side of the family. My maternal grandparents retired in 1985 and moved into their 35-foot fifth wheel and traveled all over the country. And it
yeah,
used to chap my hide that those people would come home and spend time with the younger grandkids and not us. And I was in college. Well, I graduated from high school in 84. So, it was like, excuse me, but we need our grandparents too.
yeah. My father came from 15 children,
Oh, my Lord.
9 brothers, and the rest sisters. By the time I was in the picture, there was already grandchildren and great grandchildren.
Oh, my Lord. That's
My dad's
crazy.
my dad's youngest brother passed away last year, and Jerry was 6 years older than me. Is all he was.
Oh,
That's my
wow.
dad's
Excuse me.
youngest brother. So, I have more relatives all over the place I know what to do with.
Yeah, really. Well, I'll leave you with this one funny thought. So
Okay.
neither my dad nor his second brother, or the middle brother, however you want to word it, made it to 80, made it 78. So when I was at the service for my uncle, I asked the youngest brother, my last remaining uncle on my dad's side, I said, how does it feel to be the last man standing? He says, kind of weird. And we talked a little bit about that. And I said, well, look, I expect you to do better and at least live to 80. We got to stop this dying at 77. And he looks at me all dead seriousness. And I told you earlier that I was very frugal. He says, well, I got to get to 82 to break even on Social Security. And I looked at him and I said, let's do better and not just break even. You can get some back. Are you looking for additional advice, suggestions on a catch-up episode to listen to, or simply an easy way to get in touch with me? Then you definitely need to sign up for the weekly email newsletter. It is super short, chock full of excellent information, and I do not spam you at all. So, the link for the newsletter is in the show notes. Just click on it, sign up, and you will not regret hearing from me every Wednesday morning. And now, here's a taste of what you can expect next Tuesday.
Part of what I asked everybody about is that what did you do with that? How do you address those questions that you have no answer for and the doctors have no answer for? And it's just how you have to really reshape. And that's one of the hardest parts I found about this disease, is that you have to reshape everything you've thought about, not only life, but just how you really thought about being diagnosed with an illness. It's scary to know that there is no cure. And, it's not like you're far along and you found out it's too late. It's basically saying it doesn't matter how far along you are or how long it lasts. And that's very hard for them to understand as well. And again, it hurts me really to talk about that and say it, but it's just, it's just a sad reality that they have to live with and they have to face.
Some things you wouldn't mind being stuck with, like a huge inheritance. But a phone that has to be plugged in just right so it charges is not one of those things. Switch to Verizon and we'll pay off your old phone up to $800 via prepaid MasterCard for a new one on us. Just trade in any phone from our top brands with select unlimited plans. $829.99 purchase with new smartphone line on select unlimited plans. Minimum $90 per month with autopay plus taxes and fees for 36 months required. Less $830 trade-in/promo credit applied over 36 months. Trade-in terms apply. Payoff phone requires smartphone purchase and port in with new smartphone line on select plan. Must provide most recent bill showing payoff amount of eligible phone. Additional terms apply.